run the investment banking group at Alliance Global Partners. We're based out of New York, primarily focused on capital raising and mergers and acquisitions. We'll do a quick introduction as we go from right to left.
Great. I think I'm on. Perfect. My name is Prad Sheikh. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Sail. We're a healthcare technology platform. We build data analytic-based decision tools for doctors to use at the point of care to help them with evaluations, dosing, prescriptions, really filling the gap between physicians and clinicians not knowing how to implement cannabis at the point of care for their patients, based on a global strategy here in Canada, US, and international markets as well. Company's been around for 3 years, generating positive cash flows and revenues, still private, looking to go public later this year. And happy to be here.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Martin. I'm the Vice President of Public Relations and Regulatory Affairs for Invictus MD. We're a Canadian-based company in Vancouver, BC. So I joined Invictus just a month ago. I came from the Government of Ontario. I worked at the Ministry of Finance, and so I was responsible for the cannabis legislation from a more media relations side, but still heavily integrated into communications and branding associated with the Ontario cannabis stores. Of course, that model has now changed in Ontario, so I'll provide some insights in that and the rest of the landscape in Canada. And my background is broadcasting. I was on TV for 6 years and CB24 and breakfast television. And so in a heavily regulated environment like cannabis, earned media is going to be fundamental. So my network there will be critical.
Very impressive. My name is Paolo De Luca. I'm with Organigram. I joined the company in December of 2017, so relatively new to the cannabis space myself. Organigram is one of the first 13 licensed producers in Canada and the first in Atlantic Canada. We're based out of Moncton, New Brunswick. Currently at 400 employees. We grew from 100 to 400 in less than a year, producing approximately 36,000 kilos a year. We're distributing and selling into pretty much all the provinces except for BC, Saskatchewan, and Quebec out of the gate. Hope to have an announcement with Ontario early on Monday. And yeah, we also have an office here in Toronto where we run our corporate affairs and where I'm based out of primarily.
Good afternoon. My name is Felicia Snyder. I'm the SVP of Growth at Hiku. Hiku is a brand and retail house. We have a portfolio of some of the best brands in cannabis, including our flagship brand, Tokyo Smoke. Tokyo Smoke currently has 6 brand stores across Toronto and Calgary, where we currently sell customers coffee and cannabis accessories and have the opportunity to interact with them on a daily basis. We are excited to be expanding our retail footprint significantly this year. So we have been awarded one of 4 retail licenses in Manitoba, and we will look to roll out private cannabis retail locations across Manitoba, Alberta, and with the recent news in Ontario as well. The other brands in our portfolio are Vanderpop and Doja, as well as Maitri, our Quebec-based brand. It was recently announced that Canopy has indicated they will be acquiring our business. It's expected to close in September. So when it comes to scaling our business, I've been with the company since we were literally selling coffee out of a garage. And now we have the opportunity to take our brands and really scale them globally. So very excited to be here.
Okay, great. Congratulations on the acquisition. So naturally, entrepreneurs have difficulty in scaling businesses. That's the nature of being an entrepreneur and being a small business. In the cannabis sector, though, we have some heightened regulatory issues that make it a bit more difficult to navigate through the space. So, Prad, maybe we could start with you. You could talk a little bit about some of the regulatory challenges that you guys face and how you guys overcome it.
Yeah, so I guess part of our challenge was that there really were no regulations for us. And so understanding how a business fits into a model that didn't have anyone kind of overseeing from a big brother perspective made it a little bit more complex to understand which big brother you need to satisfy. So we're a technology platform in healthcare, so we have to follow by healthcare technology rules, HIPAA guidelines. We work in the cannabis sector, so we got to follow the ACMPR guidelines. And so part of the challenges for us was understanding how you bridge the various regulations together. And more so importantly, as a software company with real global application, the goal for us was to look at how do you expand this internationally. And so each country has its own regulations. How do you put that into play? You don't want to be one of those companies that just parses out your database in each country, and then that becomes very difficult to scale. And so how do you effectively build modular systems that can be changed very quickly on the fly, especially in this industry where the regulations in each country are constantly changing too. So From our perspective, it was a little bit more challenging at the start to understand how to build that kind of infrastructure into a system. And then now the huge focus for us is now saying, how do you take what we've developed and how do you expand that internationally in a way that allows for flexibility and freedom for our customers to be able to not get stuck because, from a technology perspective, they're not limited by what they can and can't do based on changing regulations.
So naturally, Jessica, given your title, maybe you could touch a little bit about how you guys overcome some of the obstacles in the regulatory environment, teams maybe that you put in place and things that you do in order to address general regulatory affairs.
Right, so when it comes to working with the government, you look at the mandate of the federal government, who of course brought in legalization of recreational marijuana for the adult market. And their goal is simply to take revenues that are currently going to the black market and receive those revenues for the federal government. Their mandate is not to create jobs or to create a hugely innovative sector. And so when you're starting from a very restricted standpoint at the top, it becomes difficult to grow and help to educate the government on other potentials within the industry. And from an Ontario perspective, again, the provinces, some were very excited about the opportunities and they did take a more innovative standpoint. In the eastern provinces, of course, they're looking to replace a fishing industry that has depleted over time, and this is a huge opportunity for them. British Columbia has always been very innovative in cannabis, so of course they're running with that. For the other provinces, it's something they didn't want to deal with in their mandate, and we're sort of just instructed to. And so when we're working with the government agencies, who are mostly the wholesale providers of cannabis across Canada, they come from a background of alcohol. And so their experience is, we store this product, we do different product calls, and whatever sells, and that's what we put on our shelves. And so when you're helping to educate them that maybe they don't need to be in the business of actually holding any cannabis as a wholesaler. It may be easier that they operate the online channel or perhaps some of the retail distribution, but that the suppliers may be able to mail directly to the consumer, because this has a shelf life. And when we look back at prohibition, for the province of Ontario and for Canada, they gave up beer because it had to be refrigerated. So in 1927, they kept spirits. It had a shelf life. That was easier and cheaper for them over the long term. So for us, we put teams in place, developed great relationships with government across all provinces, and to help educate them. And if you're a partner in education, then you're a partner in product as well. And so that's the approach we've taken, and so we're continuing to build those relationships, and that will progress over time with the industry.
So Paulo, as a CFO, what about money moving money? So what are some of the regulatory challenges, maybe as it relates to, particularly in the CFO position, that challenges the day-to-day business?
Yeah, so we operate primarily actually exclusively in Canada. We have some expansion plans for Europe, so we're not dealing with some of the money issues that maybe U.S. companies would have in terms of banking and so forth. But we're a public company, so that's a huge issue, obviously. So we have a ongoing obligation to keep our investors appraised of material events that happen. And there's sometimes some gray areas in terms of whether we should press release something or not. So we have to make judgment calls on that depending on whether we think it's a likely event and whether maybe some people know about it already and not. So there's obviously issues that surround that we deal with on a regular basis. But we're filing financial statements and MD&A on a quarterly basis. And one of the things that I've taken upon myself when I joined the company is to provide an increased level of transparency on our operations. I want our company to be one of the easiest companies to understand. I think, generally speaking, there's a poor understanding in the industry and amongst investors. A lot of it's because there's a lot of uneducated retail investors, and even amongst some of the institutions, where they don't really have an ability to predict what the business looks like from a dollars and cents perspective. I think there's going to be a real reset in about 6 months when public companies are going to be reporting their first or second quarter of earnings after the adult rec launch. And if you can't make money in this perfect environment where there's undersupply, and presumably you can charge a very good dollar amount for your product before there's too much competition, that's a problem. So we really take pride at our company for, number one, being indoor growing producer, where it's a high quality product that we're confident we could sell at a premium, and and I'm waiting for someone to prove me wrong on this, we now have the lowest cost of production in the industry, even though we're an indoor producer. So all the numbers are in our financials and our MD&A, so if anybody wants to look at them up, they're there. So a little bit of a plug there.
Great. And what about some of the rate limiting factors in growth? So things that you guys would like to do that maybe you get limited a little bit by on the regulatory side that conflict with the business objectives of the company, Felicia?
Sure, so we're vertically integrated, so we face regulatory challenges across the value chain. But as I think about opening up cannabis retail, across Canada, come legalization of the recreational market, to me, the regulations that make me the most nervous are the regulations around marketing, advertising, and some of the regulations around how we can speak to the products in our own retail stores. Imagine going into, an alcohol store, wine store, and not knowing what that particular, bottle of wine that you were choosing was going to do to you, right? You have a customer coming in that's looking for cannabis as a solution to sleep, and they walk out with something that makes them paranoid and awake. That's a huge issue, and we would like to have the opportunity to be able to share with our customers more information on how these products may affect them. We've always stood for cannabis normalization, and we think the closer we can get to speaking about the product in a way that's normal, and that that extends into packaging that doesn't look like it's maybe some poisonous chemical that lives under your sink. The closer we can get to being normal. When it comes to how we speak about cannabis, how we are able to inform consumers about the choices they're about to make, the better.
So switching gears for a second, Paula, maybe you could talk a little bit about capital. So as you guys are scaling, the limitations, and also maybe the capital raising environment in general, what it's been like for you guys and how you've navigated those waters.
I mean, to be completely honest, there hasn't been an issue raising capital in this industry. That's not going to be the case forever. I mean, I think there's obviously a euphoria that's been associated with the industry here in Canada, and Canada's become the de facto center of capital formation in the world just because of the first mover advantage, and also the way a lot of companies go public here by way of reverse takeover. And we see it now even with the Canadian Securities Exchange and the U.S. listing. So I think access to capital has been good. It's there's been times where it's better than others. So we've taken the approach of raising capital when the market was obviously giving us the full value for our shares. We actually did a $55 million raise in December of 2017 and followed it up a month later with a $115 million convertible debenture because we saw that we would need the capital, and we thought it's better to take it while it's available. So I think going forward, again, tying it back to my earlier point, once the public companies are reporting their numbers, I think there is going to be a reset on valuations. I think companies are going to have to demonstrate and be able to forecast their revenues and profitability. And if they're not, I think access to capital is going to become more challenged for them.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So Organigram being a public company, Sale being a private company that you're thinking about going public, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the considerations on why you're thinking about going public and how that's driving the business forward.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it's funny, Paolo, you're absolutely right. I mean, access to capital hasn't been hard unless you're an ancillary company. And let's reverse the date back to 2014, 2015. I mean, we're a company that's not a grower, and when you're in the cannabis space and you're not a grower, people often shake their head and say, I don't understand. And so, for us, access to capital has become a lot easier now. But, as a young startup, technology, investing in future growth and revenue, we face a lot of challenges. Are we a technology company? Because most technologists at that time didn't even want to talk about cannabis. Are we a cannabis company? Because they don't understand if we don't grow cannabis or we're not public in 6 months. And so, we struggled through the first few years to find the right set of investors that understood how a company needs to scale and grow from a technology perspective in the cannabis space. And more recently, we've had the opportunity to have more educated investors come into the market, more traditional technology investors with a mindset of future scale and growth come into the space. And I think we've benefited a lot from having those years of experience where, we joke sometimes and say we should have waited a few years to get into the space because it's much easier today for some of our potential competitors than it was for us, but you can't fast track experience. And so, I think from our perspective, we see the opportunity to go public because it gives us continued access to capital for growth. We've generated a solid base that we can sustain that kind of growth potential on. And more importantly, I think there's going to be a number of players in the ancillary space, just like there are today in the traditional growth space, who won't have access to capital as easily as the markets start to look at, the metrics and the numbers. And I think that's a good opportunity for us to be able to leverage and take advantage of faster access to markets and quicker market share and growth through acquisitions and M&As. And so, we're excited to see our potential in that public market space give us that, sort of opportunity to kind of grow at a much faster rate now that we've had the time to build and develop the foundation that can kind of back and sustain that. So shifting gears again, Jessica, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the day-to-day operational challenges that you have, particularly as a cannabis company. So, and how you guys navigate through that and some of the advice you might give to some of the entrepreneurs in the room.
Sure. For us, it's about scalability. So when you have purpose-built facilities, you have to wait for those facilities to be built before you can expand. And so when you have, a substantial amount of strains and you want to start to develop these strains and see what the yield is like and what the plant looks like, you need space to do that. And so we're scaling up rapidly, as many other producers are. And so that's the biggest challenge, I think. And so there are many different companies are utilizing different types of growing outdoors. Some's greenhouse, ours purpose-built rooms. So they're 1,000 square foot rooms. That allows us, I think, from a risk management perspective, to protect our crop and allows more room for innovation as well. So that's where our focal point is. We know that looking at consumer purchasing habits in states like California, variety is what they're looking for. So they don't typically come back to the same brand as they may traditionally with alcohol or wine. They're looking for a new experience every time, perhaps. So, so diversity will be our strength in terms of strains.
Felicia, how about over at Hiku? Maybe some advice also for the room on some of the ways you guys navigate through some of the challenges.
Sure. Lots of challenges growing a business and scaling, and the cannabis industry in particular operates at the speed of light. I think for us, one of the key things that has really allowed us to achieve the growth that we've achieved in such a short time frame is really investing in talent. So I'm certainly biased, but I believe that our team has one of the best people groups in all of cannabis, and I think that's really been a really big driver for us in order to execute against what's a very lofty goal. We will be rolling out dozens of cannabis retail stores across Canada, and quickly looking globally to expand our footprint. And it takes a really talented team to make all that happen.
And so, Paulo, what about competition and some of the pressures that you guys face to be the best, right? So you talk a little bit about some of the consolidation of valuations that we're going to see probably in the not too distant future. So, how much pressure do you have from a timing perspective to scale quickly now, and how's it impacting your business?
I mean, when there's a shortage in particular, the ability to scale is obviously paramount. I mean, every day that we can save in terms of even turning over a room goes straight to our bottom line. So, a year ago we were producing 2,000, 3,000 kilograms a year, and now we're producing 36,000. We're going to be producing 113,000 by the same time next year. Anything we can do to become more efficient and to drive higher productivity is something that we're going to do. So one of the things that we have is an in-house IP or computer system that we use to keep track of all the plants and for fertigation, the temperature control, airflow, and so forth. And we actually manipulate it for each of the 7 strains that we grow, and we learn from it. So we're doing 5.5 cycles a year. That's like having 5 years of experience growing a crop outdoors, because they're obviously shorter periods. So every time we turn a room with the strain, we're learning from that, and we are getting better every time we do that. So the other thing is we're only growing 7 strains. So we have more in our genetic bank, but we're growing 7 because we want to have a certain economies of scale. We want to have enough product to put across the country. So we've made a conscientious decision to do that, and I think it'll work well for us. I mean, if someone's a really small producer now, they should be producing 1 strain, so they can get it across the country, like a Steam Muscle does with their beer, for example. That would be my recommendation.
So, Felicia, how do you guys position yourselves through the competition to be attractive as an acquisition company, and what are some of the challenges you guys face from a competitive landscape standpoint?
Sure. So I think we've always been a bit different from other LPs and other publicly traded LPs. Our thesis has always been that brand and retail experiences are what matter, and that's where the value will be. And so I think that was the first thing we did to sort of stand apart from a lot of the other LPs, specifically in Canada. I think for us, it was really about finding the right partner that shared that vision. And Canopy has certainly been one of the few LPs that has, from very early on, really doubled down on brands. I'd say Organigram, who we're working with in Manitoba, is another company that has come out there and really said, brands matter. And for us, I think it was really about ensuring that whoever we ended up working with really shared that vision. That was key.
So, Prad, going back to what you mentioned before on the identity issues, how have you guys navigated through that? To the capital markets, to customers. How do you guys navigate through that challenge?
It's been a huge education process. I mean, I think when we define what we do and who we are, we service a very small component of what the cannabis industry sees today, and that's the medical side, it's clinicians, it's patients, et cetera. But it reflects actually one of the largest components of the cannabis industry, which is demand, which if you don't have, none of it matters. And so part of a lot of, whether we're talking to strategic partners or investors along the way, a huge part of most of the conversations begins with just explaining the landscape and really helping the market understand that, look, in order for A, B, C, D, and E to work, you need certain components to fit together and align. And where we fit in, or where any system like ours fits in, is really around understanding how the industry roadmaps out. What does that journey look like? And if there aren't enough of you out there saying it, then most people don't understand that that's the critical element that's needed to get there. And so the last few years have been helpful. There have been more players coming in and saying it on our behalf as well, which has been great. But at the same time, it still takes a little bit of education to really kind of set the stage for where we play, what we do, how it benefits the industry as a whole, and then once people can understand that, then they can fully understand what value you deliver and create to them. So
piggybacking off of that, Jessica, maybe you could talk a little bit about how you guys handle on the public relations side the perception of the company and some of the challenges that you guys have dealt with and how you navigated through that.
I'll certainly mention, and I agree with Felicia on this point, that branding is quite significant. So we've been focused on growing for the last 4 years since we've been in existence since 2014. But now we're turning our focus to branding. So we've partnered with Authentic Brands Group in New York. We're helping to utilize some of their brands and through strategic partnerships to get our name out there. And again, why I joined the team is my media network. Again, when you're operating within this heavily regulated environment and marketing is heavily restricted, you have to do it through education, through getting earned media and getting your company name out that way. So that's going to be our strategic vision going forward and helping to educate. Working for the Minister of Finance, the questions from the media, everyone in this room is fairly well informed in the cannabis space, but the general public is not. They still think about cannabis in somebody's basement and they think about it from their experience they may have had 25 years ago, and they don't really know what cannabis is like today. And so we'd have reporters saying, is 1 doobie equivalent to 6 beers? And so that's the level of education that needs to take place on the front lines. And so we were looking at it from a government model standpoint because you can control the education at the point of sale. It's not as easy to control when it's a private sector model. Not to say that companies aren't very responsible and able to do that, and that's something that they will have to do in order to ensure that those relationships exist, with their clientele, but then also from a producer standpoint, a social responsibility perspective.
Okay, great. So just winding down here, we're probably going to have about a minute and change for each one of you guys. Looking back at some of the challenges you guys have faced and the pitfalls that you've had to overcome, what are some of the strategies that you guys have decided to employ in order to address pitfalls that you faced in the past that you now are overcoming? So what are some of the strategies that you guys have put in place, whether it be either teams or things of that nature, in order to make sure that on a go forward that you avoid the future pitfalls that a lot of small companies might face from a challenging standpoint? So maybe whoever wants to start first could go ahead, or we could start with you, Felicia, in the corner.
Sure. Alan, who's the CEO and founder of Tokyo Smoke, and myself, we both come from Google, where the model was always, Fail quickly, fail fast, fail often. Now, we employ that to some extent, and we're able to use our existing retail footprint to really be able to test narratives with consumers, to have an ability to interact with our customers and understand how do they want to learn about cannabis, where are the knowledge gaps, et cetera. And it's been really important for us to have that one-to-one interaction with customers on a daily basis to be able to try new approaches. And so I think, for us, we have to move quickly, but we're not afraid of trying new things and failing quickly, learning from it, and moving on.
So two things come to mind. One is think way ahead, because, for example, if you need a piece of equipment that's critical to you, there's 100 other people out there that want the same piece of equipment. So for example, I've heard, for example, that labeling equipment is hard to get a hold of right now for some LPs. Now we thankfully have it because we thought well ahead. So think way ahead, because there's a lot of competition for very scarce resources. And I forgot the other one right now, sorry.
Okay, no problem. We'll circle back to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's long-term thinking, and where is the industry going? What types of products will people want to consume? The market is unknown, so you have to look at some markets that are currently legal to kind of gauge what people are buying and what their purchasing habits are, and then tailor your products, and so you have products that people want to buy. So I agree, it's certainly long-term vision. It's looking at it's doing a lot of research in areas where research exists, and so it was a great presentation we had before this one to look at big data, and it's great that companies are focused on that, because that's going to be a significant driver in terms of how we're going to grow our business. From our perspective, it's the opportunities are endless here, and again, but everyone's fighting the same hurdles, and thankfully from a regulatory perspective as well, so hopefully that evolves over time.
I echo quite closely Felicia's comments. I've known Alan for years, and I blame him for not telling me that sooner. But definitely move quick and move fast is something that we definitely want to implore, and stay focused. I mean, our growth has all been around our customers evolving and changing over time. They didn't even know what they wanted to be 6 months from now, and so building something that we don't know what they want has been a huge roadblock for many years, and one of the things we've really had to do is drill down on small teams, product-focused narratives, getting back our customers' feedback, staying with their business, getting ahead of their business, and helping them get to the point that they need to get to. And so that's part of what's going to help us drive forward. And then this is an industry where you can look in every corner and there's still an opportunity to do something, and that's been something really hard and to implement into our culture, which is stay focused. Don't worry about what's around the corner or what's coming up, what else we could do, but let's be the best at what it is that we want to do and drive hard at it.
So it looks like we got just a little bit of time for everybody to give a quick outlook maybe on where they see the sector going, or any closing remarks. So I'll open it up to you guys in whatever order you'd like to go, just to give a little bit of feedback. Maybe we'll go back to Felicia.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I think I'll build off, what was just mentioned. We're building a brand new category. We truly are. Cannabis is at the intersection of vice and wellness. There's very few things that really are at that place, and consumers don't know what they don't know. And I think we are at the point where we have the opportunity to build these multi-generational brands. It's almost like thinking back to when Coca-Cola started, right? We have the opportunity to really do something that is monumental. And so, I think the outlook is bright. I think you're going to see, brands emerge. You're going to see lots of interesting technology to support the sector, both in the recreational side and the medical side emerge. And, I think in 2 to 5 years' time, it's going to be a very different discussion that people on a stage at a cannabis, conference are going to be having, and it's exciting.
So mine's a bit of a political international view. So I think with the launch of the adult rec market, the whole world will be watching. It's an experiment that everybody's following, and you have a U.S. president that is a populist. If he sees that it's working well in Canada and he sees that it's popular in the U.S., you could see the acceleration of the U.S. legalization. It's he's obviously very quick to change his mind on things, so that could be coming.
I agree. I'm going to say it's a great moment for Canada. It's a great opportunity for us to really evolve the industry right now, and then become a leader globally. And again, the global opportunities are much greater than they are within Canada alone, and so that's certainly our big picture.
Yeah, I'm most excited about the international growth of this potential. I mean, a few years ago, this was grassroots meets big business kind of model, and now you're starting to see the emergence of traditional companies coming in the space, whether it be pharmaceutical companies or insurance companies or technology companies. I think it's really exciting to see how cannabis is now starting to become part of a global platform that other industries are looking at and now trying to figure out how to get into. And for whoever's been part of that growth until then, and even for a few years to keep coming, I think it's going to be exciting to see how internationally this really becomes a real phenomenon.
All right, well, it looks like we're out of time here. We want to thank everybody, thank the panelists, of course, and hope you guys enjoy the rest of the conference.